Good evening, my friends. I hope this message reaches you in a quiet hour, when the noise of the day has faded and the hum of thought begins to rise. Because what you are about to hear is not just a story of governance or reform, it is a heartbeat, a rebirth, a nation rediscovering the weight of its own name. Night falls over the Sahel, and the red dust clings to every breath like memory. At a lonely checkpoint on the Dola border, headlights cut through the dark. A convoy halts. Customs officers step forward. No bribes. No whispered deals. Only resolve. Once, this was where corruption lived. Tonight, it is where corruption dies. Something has changed in Burkina Faso. Something deeper than policy. Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré took the reins, the air itself feels different. For decades, this border was an artery of decay, where envelopes replaced honesty and silence replaced law. But now, at the edge of a forgotten frontier, a moral army has risen. The customs officers of Burkina Faso, men and women, once dismissed as relics of dysfunction, now stand as the guardians of sovereignty. They do not just inspect cargo, they defend conscience. They do not just stamp papers, they seal dignity. For too long, Africa's borders were scars drawn by foreign hands, policed by foreign interests, feeding a system that made poverty permanent. But here, something extraordinary is unfolding. The border has become a mirror reflecting what this new nation stands for: discipline, honor, and self-respect. This transformation did not arrive with applause or headlines. It began in silence. Inspection by inspection, reform by reform. Under Traoré's command, the forgotten corners of the Republic have turned into the front lines of renewal. His belief is simple yet radical. True sovereignty does not begin in the capital. It begins where the nation meets the world at the border. In the past, Burkina's customs service was a graveyard of ambition. Officers lingered for years in outposts that paid them less in salary than in bribes. Trucks rolled through with envelopes instead of permits, and every handshake bled the country's lifeblood. But in 2024, that cycle broke. A quiet revolution took root. 30 senior officers gathered under the World Customs Organization's Integrity Program. For the first time, words like ethics and accountability were not slogans, they were orders. Before, we worked for survival, one officer said. Now we work for the Republic. Salaries rose, rotations became mandatory, declarations of assets were no longer optional. Those who resisted change were dismissed. Those who embraced it became the new face of the Republic. Yves Kafando, the new Director General of Customs, captured the spirit in one sentence: "We are not pocket officers. We are soldiers of the Republic." And soldiers they became not with rifles, but with scanners, data, and discipline. Their battlefield was corruption, their weapon, integrity. They began turning dusty posts into outposts of honor. The symbolism was unmistakable. Once, the border was a wound. Now, it is a scar that healed with pride. The reforms deepened. Smuggling routes that once funded chaos were severed. Trucks began queuing in order. The language of corruption, handshakes, whispers, folded bills, was replaced by a new one. The beep of verification systems, the click of scanners, the stamp of legality. By 2025, technology joined the fight. Burkina Faso launched an AI-driven customs platform with Web Fontaine, automating inspections and erasing the shadow space where bribery thrived. Drones watched rural crossings. Cameras captured every movement. Each transaction was logged, time-stamped, and visible. Transparency was no longer a word, it was a wall no thief could climb. But the greatest shift was not digital, it was spiritual. Officers began wearing their uniforms like armor. The same men who once bowed to smuggling networks now stood upright beneath their flag. Integrity audits became monthly rituals. Citizens could report corruption anonymously, and they did. Across the Dola corridor, across Dola and Kari, the Republic was awakening checkpoint by checkpoint, soul by soul. In October 2025, the world witnessed what this transformation truly meant. It was a humid night in Pina, a city long ruled by shadows. For years, warehouses there hid poisons behind false walls, fake medicines, counterfeit cigarettes, barrels of cyanide stored beside food. But that night, the Directorate of Territorial Surveillance and the new Customs Intervention Unit moved in silence. No sirens, no lights, only conviction. In less than an hour, they uncovered over 138 packages of illegal drugs, 436 boxes of counterfeit cigarettes, and 27 barrels of cyanide. The total value hundreds of millions of CFA francs, but the real cost was human. Cyanide leaking near food markets, a nation slowly being poisoned. "We were not seizing goods," one officer said. "We were saving lives." When dawn broke, photos flooded the airwaves. Citizens cheered not for politicians, but for customs officers. For once, heroes wore uniforms, not suits. Kafando stood before cameras and said, "No city, no market, no road will shelter fraud." Her words rang like thunder. A week later, in Bobo Dioulasso, 15 tons of illegal goods were burned under the open sky. The smoke rose high, a dark offering to the past. The nation was not just cleansing its trade, it was cleansing its conscience. They called it the Peña Doctrine, a belief that integrity could be as powerful as enforcement. International observers watched in disbelief. Some praised it as Africa's moral awakening. Others called it dangerous, too militant, too disciplined. Western analysts warned that militarizing governance would stifle free markets. But to the people of Burkina Faso, this was not militarization. It was mobilization. It was the state standing up for itself. Traoré's answer to critics was simple. Those who steal from the state are more dangerous than those who attack it with weapons. Those words became a creed repeated in every outpost, in every briefing, in every prayer before dawn. The results were undeniable. Smuggling rings collapsed. A customs fraud network siphoning billions in fake import declarations was dismantled in 48 hours. 20 officials arrested. For the first time, white-collar criminals faced the same public shame as armed insurgents. In the markets of Ouagadougou, traders whispered, "We used to pay to move. Now we move because we obey." Truck drivers along the Dola road said the same thing. If your papers are clean, you pass. The bribe culture that once defined daily life was vanishing, replaced by something rarer, trust. By 2024, Burkina's customs revenues soared 262 billion CFA francs, collected 138% of the target achieved. But behind the numbers was something far more valuable: faith. Faith that honesty could pay. Faith that the state was no longer a predator, but a protector. The small traders who once hid from inspectors now shook their hands. "I pay my taxes," one said, and somehow it feels revolutionary. This quiet revolution rested on three pillars: security, integrity, and sovereignty. The trinity of Traoré's doctrine. Every reform in customs was a mirror of his greater mission: to rebuild the state from the inside out. The Zero Corruption at the Border initiative became more than a slogan. It became the heartbeat of a new identity. Salaries rose. Officers were rotated frequently to prevent capture. Every asset was declared, every transaction tracked. And through the power of AI, the machinery of graft began to break. Clearance times dropped from days to hours. The face of the Republic grew cleaner, faster, sharper. But what truly changed was not the system, it was the psychology. In the new Burkina Faso, integrity was no longer optional. It was patriotic. Radio hosts debated what sovereignty meant. Social media called it Burkina clean. Citizens no longer mocked the state, they monitored it. The state is awake, people began to say. And in a nation long accustomed to sleeping through betrayal, that awakening felt sacred. International recognition followed. The West African Monetary Union hailed Burkina's reforms as a model of fiscal discipline. Mali and Niger sent delegations to study its systems. ECOWAS, once skeptical, quietly reopened regional trade routes, admitting that transparency had returned. Even critics in the West began to reconsider. The same commentators who once dismissed Traoré as rigid began to call him something else, a reformer without compromise. Because in a world addicted to corruption, integrity itself had become an act of rebellion. Traoré's vision reached beyond borders. His government began talks with Mali and Niger to establish a joint integrity corridor, a shared customs network across the Sahel. If completed, it would be the largest anti-smuggling alliance in West Africa, a wall not of concrete, but of conviction. Meanwhile, a new academy for customs officers began construction outside Ouagadougou. There, young recruits would study not only trade laws, but the psychology of corruption, how it begins, how it spreads, and how to kill it. "We are not teaching enforcement," one instructor said. "We are teaching conscience." But Traoré knows the battle is never over. Reform is not a monument, he says. It is a march. Every morning, across hundreds of border posts, that march continues. Every officer who refuses a bribe builds a nation stronger than any wall. Every inspection done in honesty is an act of resistance. Every uniform worn with pride is a flag raised higher than the wind. As the sun rises over the Sahel, the borders of Burkina glow not as lines of division, but as lines of defense for the spirit of a people who refuse to sell their soul. The dust that once carried the scent of defeat now carries the scent of renewal. The men and women who stand at the nation's edge no longer guard only goods. They guard the nation's conscience. In the quiet hum of the desert, one truth remains. Sovereignty is not a gift. It is a daily act of courage. And integrity, real integrity, is the rarest form of power. Burkina Faso, a small landlocked nation once forgotten by the world, now stands as a mirror to it. A challenge to every great power that preaches democracy but forgets discipline. A reminder that freedom without morality is just another word for chaos. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has not just rebuilt a customs service, he has rebuilt faith. What began as a fight against corruption has become a war for the nation's soul. From the flicker of flashlights at Dola to the ashes of contraband in Bobo Dioulasso, a new creed is written not on paper, but in action. The old Burkina sold its silence. The new Burkina sells its example. And as night falls again over the Sahel, the borders of Burkina shine like veins of light across the darkened earth. Somewhere between duty and destiny, a nation breathes, reborn. And in that breath lies a question for the world. If Burkina Faso can rise from its own ashes, what excuse remains for those who have everything and still choose decay? When duty does not sleep, corruption cannot wake. Those words now echo across Africa, a warning and a promise. The age of silence is over. The frontier of integrity has begun.